You want me to start now? Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Barry Michael, former IBF super featherweight world boxing champion from July the 12th, 1985 to August the 9th, 1987. I made three successful defenses during my career, and I had a 14-year professional career of 60 professional fights and fought all over the world, basically.
Um, okay, so let's just start from the very start of your. What was your early life like? Did it involve boxing quite heavily, or was it more you fell into the sport late?
No, we were 10-pound poms. My parents migrated from the UK from Watford when I was two, and we landed in a place called we landed in Melbourne. But we were my dad's skipper because my dad was in the Lancaster Bombers. His skipper was a doctor who lived in a place called Hamilton. So the Apex Club sponsored us to Hamilton, and we lived there for a number of years. And that's my first memories of Australia. I actually first memory is of the ship, which was the Castle Felice we came out on. There's 10-pound poms, and then we lived in Hamilton, as I said, for a few years. And then we moved to Melbourne. But as soon as I was old enough to basically, go to school and need to maybe sometimes defend myself, my dad, who had about 20 fights in the UK. Amateur fights taught me how to basically, keep my head down, punch straight, but basic stuff, but important stuff. And got in a lot of scraps at school because I was always short, and being a pom, you'd get a bit of flack occasionally. And yeah, I always did extremely well in punch-ons with school kids. And when I was 15, my older brother came home, said he'd been to a local gym, and they told him he could fight my brother. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. Passed away of cancer a year and a half ago. And he never did fight, but they told him he was good, and I said, okay, well, I'm coming tomorrow night, because at that stage we used to punch on we lived in the Commission Flats, the Commission Flats in a place called Williamstown, which is where I still am now. And Williamstown now is a great suburb, but back then, before the Westgate Bridge, no one used to come here. Anyway, so we used to punch on with the gloves, and Lionel Rose, when I was 13, the great Lionel Rose had just won the world bantamweight title, and that I became obsessed with it, with boxing from sort of 13 onwards. And then when my brother took me to this local gym, I was 15. I trained 3 weeks, twice a week for 3 weeks, had my first fight, won it on points, and, never looked back, to be honest. I was just totally addicted from then on. I took my girlfriend with me, and, she thought it was great at the time, and I did too, and off we went.
And then when did you sort of turn pro, and what was the decision behind turning sort of pro?
Well, to be honest with you, Callum, I wasn't suited to the amateurs. I was, more of an infighter and physically strong. I could box very well at a distance too, but I like to get in and have a crack. And, amateur boxing, well, to be honest with you, look, I won my first five, right? And then I actually lost five on the trot, and I reckon four of them I was robbed in because they were, it was more like fencing. And I mean, at top level in Australia, amateur boxing, we've never won a gold. We've won two silvers and a bronze, or a couple of bronzes. We've never won a gold, and I think it's because of the way they train them. I think they should learn to train them more like professional fighters do, like the amateurs from Eastern Bloc countries and other countries that have had hundreds of amateur fights and train as professionals and are looked after by the government. That doesn't happen in Australia. But yeah, so I turned amateur, had won five, lost five, then had seven more, won six of them. But the whole time, I knew that my goal and dream from an early age was one day to hear the man saying 15 3-minute rounds for the championship of the world. That was my dream and goal as a young kid. And Lionel Rose was my idol. And by the time I was 19, I started sparring Lionel Rose and Johnny Famechon. Famo had retired at that stage. So anyway, there was a thing called TV Ringside, which was like a religion. It used to be on every Monday night from Festival Hall in Melbourne. And when I got sick of amateur boxing because I didn't like the decisions and the way they'd stop you all the time, and anyway, I wasn't suited to the amateurs. And the late Bob Murdoch, actually one of his fighters, Trevor Arnott, beat me on points in the amateurs, and it's one I did actually think I lost. And Bob said, no, I thought you won it, his trainer, which I didn't. And he said, you're not an amateur. don't stick around in the amateurs, turn professional, your styles as a professional. So at 18, and by then they'd changed. You used to be able to turn professional at 16, but they've made it 18 because we'd had a couple of serious injuries in boxing. So then at 18, I turned professional on TV ringside. I won my first 7 fights that year, had 7 fights in the first year, and won them all, won the best first year boxer on TV ringside. And, that was just the start of a long, long journey to get that shot at a world title, which, took me 14 years. Well, it took me 12 years to get the shot.
And when you first sort of got into boxing and got into pro boxing, did you ever sort of know the risks, or were you aware of any of the risks of that could do potentially to your health or even to your finances or any of that?
Yeah, there was, because during my early stages of my career and the TV ringside thing, there was actually a couple of deaths in Australia in boxing and a couple of serious injuries. The great Hector Thompson, who I knew he fought, actually two fighters passed away after fighting him, which was, a big thing for him to carry on his shoulders. But I was aware of the potential dangers of boxing. Look, to be honest with you, Callum, I think I'm blessed because in 60 professional fights, I never took an 8 count. And I joke now with mates that I should be able to get away with anything because my head's copped more hits than Google. I was aware of the issues, but and I was, it was always in the back of my mind, but I was never really badly hurt. Like I was never concussed, and yeah, so I'm pretty well blessed, I think.
And then you fought Lester Ellis for a title belt, and it was on, I think it was the first televised, world televised title in Australia. How was the sort of the pressures of fighting him and in that bout and in another title bout? What was the sort of pressures going into that fight, and how did you deal with it?
Well, Callum, I'd already won, Victorian, Australian, Australasian, and Commonwealth titles twice, lightweight title. I always wanted to fight Boom Boom Mancini. That was my goal, to get a shot at him for the WBC lightweight world title. And I got as high as about number 3, I think. But I got, after I beat an American called Al Carter, a black American boxer who had 24 KOs, 23 KOs in 24 fights when I beat him. And it's on YouTube if you want to watch it. I beat him in one of my toughest fights. He was never the same again. He actually beat Aaron Pryor and Tommy Hearns in the amateurs as well. But after I beat him, I got told years later by David Wolf, who was Boom Boom Mancini's manager, that they didn't fancy Boom Boom with him because they were both from Alliance, Ohio. And he said, when you beat Carter, he said, we weren't going to fight you, and neither was anyone else. So it set me back years. But Lester Ellis, who I'd picked as a future world champion when he was 12 and I was 22, sparring him and about, half a dozen other young kids, I got out the ring and I said, what's this kid's name? And they said, Lester Ellis. I said, this kid's going to be a world champion. I took him and Graham Brooks, another boxer that I re-won the Commonwealth title off, under my wing, and taught them, and we trained together, and we're still all good mates today. And the only reason that Lester came on because Lester won the IBF world title of the Korean, I Won't Kill You, I think it was by memory. And he made a successful defense against the very talented Rod Sequenin, knocking him out late in the fight, of a very tough fight. And one day at the gym, I just said to Dad, I'm going to challenge Lester Ellis. And he said, what, at lightweight? I said, no, I'm going to fight. I'm going to challenge him for his world title. He said, son, I think you might have to retire. I said, what do you mean? He said, you can't make the weight. I said, Dad, I'll cut a leg off if I have to. And to be honest with you, I did it all scientifically. I went and had my fat content weighed underwater at the university. They worked out like a marathon runner. I think it was about 6 or 7%, 6% or whatever. I could make the weight comfortably and have my strength. So I went to a nutritionist, a dietitian, a famous one called Karen Inge, and she put me on a diet. And look, the only reason I believe the Ellis camp agreed to the fight, because we'd sparred a lot of times. I was always the boss, but it was always a war and it was always close. Even we sparred up until 6 months before he won the world title. And they were always wars. And Lester couldn't help but try to kill everyone in the gym. Anyway, I went on this diet. I did it properly, and they agreed to, when they agreed to fight me. That was the big thing with it. they never thought I could possibly make 58.95. I hadn't done it in a decade. And the only reason I believe that they accepted it was Dana Goodson, a black American guy who I'd met in Hawaii and brought back to Australia with me as a co-trainer. I'd taken him back to Miami. I'd signed a world title fight contract with Bob Arum before I fought Lester. And I took Dana with me and my dad, and I was sparring in the Fifth Street gym in Miami. I was sparring with a bloke called, pretty sure it was Mo Hussein from the UK, actually. I'm pretty sure it was Mo who was sparring with, and I stepped forward on the ball on my left foot, and it just ripped the plantar fascia clean off my heel because I'd had a few cortisone shots from pain in my heel. When I came back to Melbourne, the surgeon said they'd never seen a complete plantar fascia tear without an operation. So that was the end of that. And yeah, so I'm blessed that Lester but Dana Goodson, Dana, my dad, Dana, and I were all broke down crying in Miami, missed this fabulous opportunity. American television signed contract with the great Bob Arum to fight Harry Arroyo. I was supposed to fight a guy called Juan Arroyo at the Fontainebleau Hilton in Miami, where I was staying. So that finished that. I came back to Melbourne, had to get inserts because I had a flat left foot. I think it was 5 or 6 months later, they brought Juan Arroyo to Australia and I stopped him in 7 rounds, but it meant nothing. It meant nothing, so I still was without a world title fight. But Dana Goodson, the American that I lived with in Hawaii, taken to Miami with me and got him set up in Melbourne, promoted him in a fight here, got him jobs and everything. Within 1 week of me collapsing in Miami, he jumped ship and was training Lester Ellis, which is pretty piss poor, I thought. And he convinced them that because he saw me struggle to make 63.5 in one of my fights in Hawaii about 1982, 83 it might have been. Yeah, so he convinced them that I couldn't make the weight. And I think Keith Ellis, Lester's brother, believed I couldn't make 58.95 and be strong enough to fight 15 rounds. But, they were wrong.
And then how did that feel after the fight, sort of gaining that world title? And you said that you've been working from it since you were sort of 16 years old, and that was your main goal straight away. How did it feel?
Callum, it was amazing. And I look to the day I die, I'm indebted to Lester for giving the opportunity. And look, of all the fighters I fought around the world, Lester was one of the greatest. He was such an incredible puncher. Round 3 he had me in all sorts of trouble. I was in Disneyland in round 3. It was funny because the referee stepped between us and warned me for punching low, which I didn't think I was doing. And then he said, box on. In that split second, I was thinking about punching low, which I'm thinking I didn't do it. And Lester picked me up with an uppercut, hit me with an uppercut, and crashed me with a right hand. And oh man, was I in Disneyland? And he pummeled me, and he knew I was badly hurt, got me against the ropes and hammered me. And finally, I grabbed him and pulled him up close. And I said, if that's the best you can do, you want to forget it. He said to me afterwards, he said, if we ever fought again, he'd wear earplugs because he reckons I've talked and fought for 15 rounds. But he gave me a war. He broke my nose in round 12. I won a clear unanimous decision, but it wasn't one-sided. It was brutal all the way through. And Lester was undoubtedly one of the greatest fighters I ever fought.
Yeah, and you also took steps towards sort of bringing Australia's boxing scene to what it is today, even to the extent that sort of bringing it to mainstream audience. How did it feel to be sort of a star within boxing and put someone that you looked up to, like you have looked up to when you were younger?
Can I have that again, Callum? I'm not sure the actual question there.
How did it feel to sort of be a star in boxing when you won that world title? How did it feel? Did it change anything for you, even walking down the street necessarily?
Oh, yeah, your life's never the same after you achieve something like that. And even now, when I go to the supermarket, lots of people say hello, and it's really nice, to be honest. There was, to be honest with you, when I beat Lester Ellis, I copped a lot of nasty stuff because, I was 30 and he was 20-year-old golden boy, and was really marketed well. And a lot of people turned on me for beating Lester, and a lot of people believed that I wouldn't give him a rematch match, which was bullshit. I was always up for the rematch. It took Lester 30 years to come out and say that he never wanted a rematch, and I always had his number. But in the meantime, I was abused quite a bit. But the majority of people were super nice, and yeah, it was it sort of changed my life. To be honest with you, it didn't end up financially like I thought it would. I didn't, I mean, these days I wish I was fighting. These days, the money in boxing these days is phenomenal. Yeah, I look what No Limit are doing with the zoo, with Timmy Zoo, and the fortunes that they're creating there for every fighter that's involved with them, and the promotions they're doing in boxing is incredible. And it just wasn't happening back then. We were close a couple of times, and I was that close with big American fights that fell over. I had Bobby Chacon. I spoke to him on the phone. That was going to happen for a quarter of a million in the States, and it just seemed that every time I got looked at closely, they'd pull out on me. And I think the fact that I beat Al Carter, which is a fight that you should have a look at, Callum. I think the fact that I beat him cost me dearly, when it came to overseas. And I went and trained in the States. I used to stay at Chris Dundee and place Angelo Dundee's brother when I was in Miami, and train at the Fifth Street Gym and sparred people like Freddie Pendleton, who was world lightweight champion, and anybody who they sort of put in front of me, to be honest. But after that original Bob Arum offer, I didn't get another opportunity in the States. Close a couple of times, but it just didn't happen.
Do you think that you fighting over there and boxing over there when you would sort of like sparring and getting into it, and do you think that sort of played a part in why you didn't get given an opportunity over there? They were quite sort of scared to sort of give you the opportunity because you don't know, because they thought that they were going to hurt their fighters.
Possibly, I don't think so much that. As I said, I think as David Wolf told me, it was 1981. I think I beat Al Carter. 1987, I'm at the IBF convention I think it was in Norfolk, Virginia, by memory, and I was there to basically get up and defend myself because they were on the verge of stripping me for not defending. I'd signed with Frank Warren. You probably know that.
Yeah.
Frank Warren got me my first defense against my third successful and last winning fight against Najib Daho, and I beat him clearly over 12, and had him gone in the last round or so, but should have finished him, but didn't. It was meant to be 15 rounds, but they cut it back to 12. Anyway, Daho, you probably know Daho in 1978. I'd beat him in 1986. It was or 85, it might have been. In 1978, it would have been, or actually would have been before that, 77. Anyway, I lost an 8-round decision to Daho in Wales, South Wales, for 400 quid. Anyway, then Frank Warren rang me out of the blue. I was actually having a breakdown in Tasmania with my first wife, Sandy, in the Launceston Federal Casino, and the maitre d' come up and said, Mr. Frank Warren's on the phone, wants to speak to you. And he offered me, good money to defend the world title against Daho in Manchester, which I did. And that was the last winning fight of my career. But after that, for the next 8 months, Frank Warren didn't get me a fight. The IBF's on the verge of stripping me. I end up 4 months before I lost the world title. I don't know if you know this, Callum. There's a few documentaries about it. I was severely jumped by some gangsters in a nightclub, and had my nose smashed right across my face. One of them, the main gangster, Alphonse Gangitano, tried to bite my cheek off. And that fight, that belting, I had to have my nose rebroken and reconstructed. And then I went to the convention, met David Wolf, and he told me that, beating Carter cost me any chance of ever getting a shot. And he wished me all the best against Rocky Lockridge, which was my last fight. And to be honest with you, by then, after the beating I copped in Lazars, I was ready to retire, but I wanted to get a good payday. And, fighting Lockridge was my best payday. But when I looked at Lockridge, less than a year before, he'd lost the majority decision to the great Julio Cesar Chavez, who went 92 straight. He was 55-0 when Lockridge lost the majority to him, and a lot of people thought Lockridge deserved it. Undoubtedly one of the best fighters I fought, Lockridge. He broke my nose broke in the first punch he hit me in the first round because it had been rebroken and restructured, broken the first minute. A right eardrum busted in round 2. And, for 8 rounds, he was winning the fight, but not by a great deal. But I just wasn't myself. And anyway, my left ear filled full of blood. As I said, my right eardrum was busted, my nose was busted. In the end of round 8, I went back to the corner, and my dad said, "Enough, son, I'm stopping the fight." And I said, "No problem." I wasn't real worried because I had blood coming out of every orifice nearly, including passing blood, which was the first time I passed blood. Actually, after Lester was the first time I passed blood, and Lockridge the second time. Which is a bit scary. But I looked like Quasimodo, and I announced my retirement in the ring. And Frank Warren came in my dressing room and said, you shouldn't have announced your retirement. You're only 32. You can still make a lot of money. You haven't fought for 12 months. I said, well, that's your effing fault. And he said to me, I've got bad news. And I said, what is it? He said, because there was a bomb scare prior to the fight in Windsor. And the whole building had to be vacated. I just refused to leave. My first wife and my dad and I, we stayed there while they searched for this supposed imaginary bomb, which I wonder whether the whole thing was a rort. Because Frank said to me after the fight, when he came to see me, he said he couldn't pay me that night because his briefcase had been stolen during the bomb scare. Anyway, yeah, so Frank didn't help me a great deal. I said, I didn't get a fight for 12 months. At 32, and, I was always a bit of a party animal, always liked to drink and that. So when I fought Lockridge, it wasn't me, to be honest. And I went 8 rounds, and I still never took an 8 count. He hit me hard. He never really stunned me. He was a clubbing, strong puncher, very physically strong, Lockridge. Unfortunately, he's passed away since, Rocky, because he had major drug issues, and I actually helped his family with that. I put him into a health farm at one stage, which helped him a great deal. Yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey.
And just to go slightly back to the beating that you took outside of the ring, sort of how did that lead to then you planning your retirement and then saying, "Look, I'm done"? Was it a culmination of a lot of things, or was it that standalone incident that changed your mind?
To be honest with you, after the beating in Lazars, prior to the beating in Lazars, when I won the world title, I said I'd have one defence and retire. Well, I had 3 successful defences, and I was still looking for that big payday, to be honest, against someone with a big name. We were close. We were close a few times. There was talk of Alexis Arguello. None of it came off. But after I copped the beating in Lazars, it was like it took everything out of me. I just didn't. The desire, I thought, well, I've copped this because I beat Lester Ellis and they lost, lots of money because they were behind Lester Ellis in a big way. They were paying off for 3 months after the fight. And I just thought to myself, I'm over, I'm done. I'm not the same. But I wanted to get a reasonable payday, which, I got against Lockridge. And I just knew that if I lost the fight, that was it. And I announced my retirement in the ring, and I've never fought since. But to be honest with you, Callum, I would have come back. There was talk of a fight with Jeff Fennick and I. There was talk of a fight with Lester Ellis and I. I never, ever, ever had one legitimate offer to fight again after I retired. Might have had a couple of bodgy offers, but I was never offered a legitimate fight. And I was never going to take a loss against anyone. And I've got to tell you, my 3 biggest offers throughout my career were to lose fights.
Really?
Which I never would consider. Yeah, I would never consider it. So it does happen in boxing, unfortunately. I've seen it happen. There's times when you'll see, a big upset victory or a victory and you'll think, was that for real? And sometimes it might not be for real, because the money dictates.
Yeah, it seems to me
Generally, boxing's a great sport. Generally, boxing's a great sport in every respect. It helps so many people, especially what I see with amateur boxing now. I just came back from a place called Dysart in Queensland, outback Queensland, and they had 3 outdoor boxing rings, this massive big venue, and it was a coal mining town. They had 45 bouts on. All these young girls, young boys, middle age, old age, every age you can consider, that are all training, and like. And at the moment in Melbourne, there's a big dispute going on, with a group called MVC Boxing, who are battling the Maroondah Council because they put the rent up from 6,800 a year to over 100,000 a year for this MVC Boxing that helps underprivileged kids, people with disabilities, old people, help so many people, and the frigging council's doing that to them.
Yeah, I was
Disgusting.
an amateur event literally this Saturday in my hometown of Southampton, and it just to see how many people it brings together and how many people it sort of gives a purpose to, especially younger lads that were sort of 16 or anywhere from 16, 17 or under. They
Even under, yeah.
Yeah, the amount that they commit to doing and how
Yeah,
healthy keeps them away. They even do a program with some of the naughtier children at school that they give their program to. It's just brilliant to see how the sport
it is.
can really help people.
Undoubtedly it helps people. Mental health gives them a direction, gives them discipline, gives them something to aim at, and gives them some belief in themselves as well. So many things. Boxing cops are unfair flack, I believe. And I mean, look, they're very strict these days with head injuries and stuff like that. And more is coming out about Australian rules football, with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, after so many of these footballers are retiring. And I see, I mean, there's ones that I've known that have definitely been damaged from repeated concussions. Some of these footballers have had over 50 concussions. I mean, geez, not many boxers there, and there are boxers that have had 50 concussions, but it wouldn't happen in Australia because they'd take your license off you after maybe half a dozen. You know, I think our boxing commissions are pretty good in Australia, and I think boxing generally is a far safer sport than Aussie rules. I don't know if you know much about Aussie rules football, Callum, but it's pretty, like you get a lot of head knocks beyond the play, and that's what I believe causes the damage, to be honest.
And then we're just going back to your career. How did you deal with retirement after having your career? You say that you got a few half offers to maybe come back and fight, and then some offers to potentially lose it and come back and fight. How did you deal with retirement in general?
Well, I married my first wife, Sandy. We bought a beautiful house on the Gold Coast, and for the first probably 5 or 6 months, I trained every day just like I normally did, and was at the gym helping people, but not thinking of fighting again. And then I thought, and I was spending too much money. And one of my mates said to me, "Do you need a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I probably do." So I started selling advertising, which I did really well at. And then I got into insurance, and I took off selling insurance for um, some of the big companies, Zurich and MLC, and a few other big companies, and end up with setting up Barry Michael Financial Services, doing loans as well. End up having about a dozen people working for me in big office space in Bundall. And then we had the what they called the recession we had to have, and the divorce we had to have, which stuffed everything. And I ended up winning custody of my first son. When he was 4, I brought him back to Melbourne and started again. And I didn't get back into the financial and insurance business, which I should have. I got into another field, which was amusement machines, and I built up a business with amusement machines for a decade or so with great partners, Greek partners, and made really good money for a long time. Finally sold that business, then got into real estate. So yeah, I mean, but I've always been involved with promoting boxing, managing fighters. I'm helping a few fighters at the moment. I'm training with the young bloke tomorrow who's Jesse Tiprat Bolt, his name is. He's 22 amateur fights, 20 wins. Going to be a gun. He's a gun now, but he's only 19. He's going to go a long way, so we're going to give him some help. But that's what I still do. I'm not in the gym more than a couple of days a week, but when I go, it's usually specifically to help someone, and to put them on the right track, basically. And it's something get a lot of satisfaction from, to be honest.
And just one final question, because I am running out of time on my free trial of Zoom that it allows you to record. But one final question: what one piece of advice would you give someone who either wants to become a boxer or wants to start training boxing, from a person that has lived the boxing life that you have?
Well, to be honest with you, anyone that shows any interest, I say to them, look, go for it, because no one looks down on you if we've all got to start somewhere. Go for it, because it is a great physical and mental conditioning thing. It helps you in every respect of your life. You meet great people. The people in the fight game are the best people in the world, and I'm still great mates with a lot of the guys that I fought: Frank Bravas, Lester Ellis, Andy Broom, guys that I had wars with, and some fighters overseas still too. So yeah, I'd say go for it. Whether you want to be an amateur or a professional, give it your best shot, because it's the best sport there is.